Okay, looks like we are recording. And guys, I am very excited to have on the program Jim Sande. Jim Sande is a someone that I've looked up to for a really long time. He's a musician, an artist, and uh, this really got started like decades ago. I got introduced to Jim Sande's music through an NPR listing of interesting, new music. And one of Jim Sande's tracks from this album he put out called Harvest Bell Ride was on there. And I fell in love with it and then subsequently fell in love with the music. And so this is a bit of a departure because this channel has primarily been about like animal rights topics, but I wanted to talk about, some of the artists that have meant a lot to me and introduce people to artists that have meant a lot to me. So anyway, my rambly intro there. Jim, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's really great to be here, and I'm happy to be interviewed and let's see what we can do here.
Yeah. So thanks for doing this experiment with me. And it's fun because, I consider your music somewhat experimental too. You seem to be going in very many different directions. So, one of the things I'll say, I'm going to try to keep this from being just me gushing about you the entire interview, but one of the things that I've really come to appreciate about your music is that it sort of opens me up. It's just sort of like makes me sort of interested in more things. It's almost like it's almost like taking a psychedelic in some ways because it like activates parts of my brain. It's just very, very conducive to wonderment, I guess, is a way. Like
Mm.
I'm gonna struggle to find the words to describe it, but um anyway, let's just break down a little bit how this interview came about. For one, I reached out to Jim probably decades ago at this point, probably like 20 years ago, just to share with him how beautiful I thought his music was and how much it meant to me. And he wrote me back this really kind message. And so over the years, maybe 5 times or so, I've sent Jim a message about new music that he's put out. And Jim has always sent me these really nice responses, really informative, sharing some of the things about what has inspired him. And at some point, I was thinking, yeah, maybe I should just, instead of like having these every couple of years reach outs to Jim Sande, maybe I should just invite him on the program. We could have a chat. That would be fun. So, um, well, first of all, like before we even get started, like what's been going on in your life lately, Jim? Because we were going to do this interview before. I know you said you had COVID, so you've been going
Oh,
through it.
yeah. Well, I'm older now, so I've had the opportunity now to retire, and with retiring, I have a lot of time to do the things I really enjoy, really as much as I want. So I've been doing quite a bit of painting, and I've been doing quite a bit of music writing and rehearsing, and I also do quite a bit of meditation practice. This is something that I got involved with. Gosh, when I was in my late 20s, um, and it has accelerated since then. And then I also do some writing. I like to write short stories and um, just it's I like creative kinds of things. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Interesting. Is there any way that we can get a hold of your shorts? I'd be fascinated to read some of your short stories.
Um, well, I mean, that's interesting because when I started doing that a few years ago, and I started writing and decided to start doing it as a regular practice. And I really did it without having any objective in mind, like I'm going to publish it or I'm gonna do this or that with it. And really, it's just been family members and friends that have read it and given me feedback. My daughter who's a doctor was also a literature major, and so she gives me tips, things like don't use the word literally in your stories. It's not a good word, things like that. But no, I'd happy to share some stories with you. Perhaps I can, you know, email them to you. I've thought about
Yeah.
the idea of doing like spoken word and music project as well. maybe
Mm,
bringing some of that into it, so including it in the music realm a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah. When I was younger, I played in many rock bands, and I was the singer and the songwriter, and so writing lyrics was always part of it as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's pretty ironic because take going back to the very beginning of our correspondence is I shared with Jim that I read this writer, the famous Japanese writer Haruki Murakami,
Mm.
and I I read Murakami listening to Jim Sande to the
Mm.
point now where it's if I'm reading the book without listening to that, it doesn't feel complete. It's
That's
it's
nice.
it's fascinating to me because, like, in preparation for doing the interview, I didn't prepare because I wanted it to be pretty natural. But all I did was today, just was out riding around in my car listening to Harvest Bell Ride again, just to kind of
Oh,
remind me.
yeah.
And yeah, I just sort of had the thought, like, it's just so miraculous how it seems to me, and I know this didn't happen, but it's almost like you guys collaborated. Like the stories are so perfect with the music.
Ah,
And yeah, it's just uh, that to me is just pretty incredible. Let me ask you, when you created music, and especially, like, I guess going back to Harvest Bell Ride, which to me is just this masterpiece, this very creative masterpiece. Um, what was sort of was it sort of similar to the intention that you had with writing, where you started to just create and you didn't quite know what you were going to do with it, or what was the how did that one come about?
Um, so I started. I've been producing music on my own for a while, and I got into the multi-tracking thing where I was being taking over the role of being the entire band. So laying down a track, doing a little bit more, laying down these very dense tracks is something I started doing probably about 10 to 15 years before Harvest Bell Ride. So I put out a couple of CDs. Initially there were songs with singing, and then some of it was instrumental music. And then when I got to Harvest Bell Ride, I had it was all instrumental music. So uh, the music was very much influenced by kind of composers that I admired, that I had the good fortune of meeting, people like Phil Glass, and
Mm,
studying his work. And then also, I went to a very progressive music school. So there was a lot of electronics going on there, and a lot of experimentation going on. This is a big deal in the late '70s around here, and so and I had friends that were also electronic musicians. Richard Lanehart comes to mind. He was a very good friend of mine. Fortunately, he's passed away. He's an amazing ambient music producer. And so by the time I got to Harvest Bell Ride, I had um, I had many years of working on multi-track music behind me. And what happened at the same time is with this beautiful set of virtual instruments came out that really mimicked very, very well the sound of instruments, oboes, clarinets, flutes, and you could play it all on a keyboard. So that Harvest Bell Ride was all done on a keyboard, pretty much the same keyboard, using virtual instruments, which are it's the ideas like you have a synthesizer, but with virtual instruments, what you have is the sounds are kept in the computer. So there's a lot more detail, and there's a lot more uh, similarity to real instruments. In fact, they are samples of real instruments. So each note is actually a sample of an actual instrument. That it's not that you're actually taking like a riff or something from an instrument. You're actually playing the riff yourself, but the sound of it is very, very close to an actual instrument. So, I mean, when that happened, uh, and then some other very positive things happened in my life. We moved into a beautiful house, in a
Mm.
much nicer area, and my daughter is doing very well, and this kinds of things. So there's a lot of joy around Harvest Bell Ride, you
Oh,
know.
wow, interesting.
And so
Yeah.
the idea of, I think the Harvest Bell Ride was about following the seasons. And it was kind of like a, in a sense, I'm drawing a blank on the Vivaldi and four seasons, and this idea of having four seasons and following the sequence of seasons. So there was
Mm-hmm.
like swimming and fire, like summer, August bug hum, these kinds, which my friend always kids me about because it uses four U's, and we played Scrabble, and he liked that I had a title that utilized the four U's.
Nice. You got a lot
So,
of points on that one.
yeah, and then Harvest Bell Ride was just this kind of poetic idea, maybe about the fall, which is my favorite time.
Hmm.
And I don't know, is there more you want to know about it? Is there anything I could?
Well, yeah, it's interesting to me that you say that there was a lot of joy around you, and you can hear some of the joy in the music, but there's also, so when I was reading, it was the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. It's Murakami's famous, probably the most famous novel, and the story is about a guy whose wife has left him, and he's sort of taken on this journey as he tries to understand what has happened, where she went, why she left, that sort of thing. Very
Yeah,
simple story, but kind of a heartbreaking kind of story as
yeah,
well. But um, so I hear some joy in that, but I also hear um, isolation. I
mm,
hear sadness,
yeah.
mourning, even. So is that because you're going through sort of the seasons of a year and the seasons of life, perhaps, or are you trying to explain things like that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, this is Buddhism, 101. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the first noble truth. The truth of suffering. So certainly that has been something that, like everyone else in the world, I have certainly experienced and experience, and with meditation, know about. Yeah, so that certainly comes through. I mean, in a sense, you could say, I think that in a way, all music, in a sense, is kind of very poignant,
Mm,
because it's a reflection of that. You can't help but get away from that, that there is suffering, and it's so pervasive, and even when you don't think it's there, it's there.
yeah,
The
yeah.
suffering of change, the suffering on suffering, and the pervasive suffering, and then you have but then you have the solution, and the solution is awareness, and the cultivating your awareness, this clear knowing quality that we all have, and to have that present. But I liked what you were saying about this person doing this sort of introspective examination of this hard moment in their life where they're trying to figure out, how the relationship fell apart and changed, and all of that. That I rings true for me. I certainly went through that. I
Mm.
was married and divorced. It was very difficult. And then, but I've found a new relationship, and that one has worked out very nicely. So,
Sounds like it has, yeah.
yeah.
I'm very happy for you in finding
Thank you.
that joy in
Yeah.
your life. Yeah, and sort of the relationship loss, I think, and maybe why the novel spoke to me
Yeah.
so much is there's this sort of like feeling of bewilderment, um, trying
Mm.
to understand what has happened.
Yes.
And but I feel like I like how you mentioned the solution because uh, the music sort of provides the solution for me. And when I'm reading the novel,
Mm.
because it's taking you on this sort of journey where like it almost reminds me of like a hike. Like like it's not really always about the getting to the summit of the mountain or whatever. It's about
Okay.
wandering through the woods, the whole path, the whole journey, right? And um your music really takes you on this journey, and that's one of the things that really fascinates me is just the surprises in your music where you're going in one direction, and then your music just goes in a completely different direction or a different idea that I think I even asked you. I sent you a message one time just to kind of quiz you on like where you got your inspiration from, because I was someone who was playing music, also playing piano, and I'm always looking for that spark, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by how your mind works, because
Yeah,
you
aren't we
really,
all? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you
Um,
take us in these interesting places.
yeah. Boy, I don't know if I have a good answer for that one because, I mean, we want to be self-aware and we want to know ourselves as well as we can. I grew up, I had an older brother who has passed away, but he was a painter and he was very, very good. He was a student at Pratt in Brooklyn, and he lived in New York City, and he did a lot of exhibits. And then when I was growing up, I used to just watch him paint. I was just watching him do it. And this was like my older brother. It was like a big deal to have an older brother. So your hero, right? And you're
Mhm.
watching him paint and seeing how he did all that. And I think it was very influential. And but I mean, I've always been very interested. There isn't anything I'm really not interested in. I mean, I'm kind of uh, I don't know if what would I not be interested in? I'm not interested in cruelty, and
Mhm.
stupidity, things like that. Like, but I do like creativity. It's a really big deal for me, and it's kind of interesting, in the a while back, I was studying the Briggs-Myers personality indicator. Have you ever looked at that one, typology indicator?
I think I've
And
seen people do it.
yeah, and so the response that I would get, it was a lot of internal intuition was supposed to be my forte. And whenever taking IQ tests and things like that, it was always about visual imagination and ideas. So I I'm one of those people that has more ideas than more ideas come up in my mind than I'm capable of actually producing or bringing to fruition. Because it
Mhm,
takes
mhm.
time to learn a piano piece. It takes time to get it all out, and so I've had to like focus it more. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's where I feel a lot of gratitude towards you, because to me, your music, everything that you've shared has been such a gift. Like it's
yeah,
sort of a window into like you said, I hear also in your music, and I like that you said that you're not interested in cruelty, because I hear a sort of a sensitivity, a compassion and empathy in your music. There's definitely like and I would say even I can't say especially now, but you've been
mm,
releasing these piano tracks that are more simple, and there's just
yeah,
a tendency towards a gentle touch, I feel like, that I
yeah,
hear.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, and
yeah.
I guess that's sort of just you coming out, right? Because
Yeah, I could do different things. I mean, I've worked in different genres. I like Limp Bizkit as much as anybody else. I mean,
first
yeah,
concert was
very first concert was Limp Bizkit. Yeah,
yeah.
my first concert was The Who. But,
Mhm.
breaking stuff. I love that song. So I mean, it's not like I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. I listen to Eminem.
Mhm.
I listen to all kinds of stuff. Um, uh, but it's not like But I think part of what I'm doing now is um, I couldn't say it's commercial, but I mean to a certain extent, I see that there's an interest in this music that I'm doing. I'm actually trained to be a concert classical guitarist. That's my
Yeah.
training. I went to graduate school for that, and so for the longest time, I thought that, gee, there's no interest in this. I mean, I'm not going to pursue this because why? Nobody's listening. But once Spotify kind of came along, it kind of opened up this idea that actually, if you take the entire world of people and they're listening to Spotify, and there's a real lot of people that are interested in that kind of like solo instrumental performances. And so I could kind of get, now it's like, well, I can get back to something that I've always wanted to do, which is to do the solo performance stuff. And there's actually an audience for it, you know? So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's, I think I do work well when I'm getting like some positive feedback. I mean, if I know that somebody's listening, it's helpful. It really is. I mean, I'm pretty sure anybody who's involved in the arts enjoys knowing that there's at least a few people out there hearing your stuff, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so there was that. And it was very interesting to me because I just want to backtrack a second. That NPR song thing, it got on All Songs Considered. And
Right.
NPR used to have a situation where um, you could download your music or send them some of your music on a CD, and they check it out. And if they liked it, they put it on All Songs Considered or not. You know, you wouldn't get. And so I sent them Harvest Bell Ride, and they liked the first song and put it on their website and played it. You know, so I think it got played um, throughout NPR. You know, land, which I think is almost the whole world. So it was like, wow. You know, I was very curious to see what if any what would come of that, you know. And so I did
Hmm.
get some responses from people, including you, and it was very nice hearing from you. And it's very, very helpful to hear from people that, you know, they like your stuff. It really is, especially when you're in a situation like me where, you know, I'm not like a major artist or anything. I'm just an indie guy who's um doing this on my own, purely really out of love and an interest in doing that. You know, I had
Hmm.
tiny little glimpses of that. Maybe when I was playing in rock bands, there's like somebody in the Bruce Springsteen band that was interested in producing my group, this kinds of things, you
Hmm.
know. But that's really a very tricky business, you know.
No doubt. No doubt. Shout out to All Songs Considered for being open to that. And yeah, I used to listen to All Songs Considered religiously. It was one of my favorite things that NPR did.
Yeah.
Um, and Bob Boilen and Robin Hilton and Stephen Thompson, they were just so great. They were very fascinated with not not just big music. They didn't ignore
Right.
bigger music, but they were interested
Yeah.
in what kind of things that were being missed out there. So yeah, that was
Yes.
very consequential because their selection of your song to include
Yeah.
somehow crossed I definitely listened to it, and the rest is history. And at that time I was working with public radio, and I'm
Oh,
pretty sure this is probably back when we still had CDs, and so we used
yeah.
CDs. So I think I ordered the CD. It's probably still floating around the public radio station in Wilmington, where I used to use your music as background when I would speak. So you were getting heard, unfortunately with no credit
Oh, that's
by
okay.
listeners in Wilmington, because
Yeah.
yeah, they would hear like us talking over the music. But yeah, it's yes, I can definitely attest to what you're saying, that any kind of feedback is very helpful. And it's funny, I was having a conversation how like this YouTube channel that I started with the point to just interview people about animal stuff. I started to play video games on it because I see other people doing that, just to see if it could grow the channel.
Yeah.
And then it ended up being just something that I lazily do. um, but I was talking about how one time when I was streaming on YouTube, um, I noticed how when there was just one person in the chat with me, how my mood was so much better than
Right.
when I was there by myself. And my friend pointed out the circuit breaker for that was one. It just was one person that was
Right.
appreciating.
That's it. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I recently read a story about Vincent van Gogh, and he passed away. And I guess his brother was married to a woman, and the woman is in an apartment in France, I believe, maybe it was Paris. And in her apartment, she has like a couple of hundred of Vincent van Gogh's paintings, and people are telling her, just get rid of it, just, you know, give yourself a break, just get rid of all that stuff that's cluttering up your apartment, So you have this like one person who's like critical of like presenting to the world Vincent van Gogh. I mean, it's like, it's just a major, major artist,
Indeed.
unapproachable, you might say, in terms of popularity and such.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
one person can make a world of difference.
They
Yeah.
can, they can. Well, initially you brought up painting and you said your brother was a painter
Yeah.
and you seem to have followed in his footsteps because you do some visual art yourself. I know because when you release your well, I've seen you now. I follow you on Facebook, so I've seen you do gallery presentations and stuff like that. But I've also seen that with your, especially with your latest tracks, you release them with a painting that you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice touch.
Thanks.
How much do you put into painting and doing visual arts versus
Yeah.
audio art?
I probably put more time into music than I put the most amount of time, believe it or not, into meditating. That this is
Mhm.
really my main thing at this point. But then probably music next, and then art and writing after that. What I found, what I found for me at this point in my life is that what is most important is just regular daily contact with something. So um, in the past, I was more of a binger, and on Harvest Bell Ride, I would maybe cut out from work and come home and spend the afternoon because I was so involved, like that, and just really wanting to get this thing, getting it accomplished.
Mhm.
At that time, the idea was you put out a CD that was roughly around an hour's worth of music. This was like the standard, So it's like, okay, so I had this goal, an hour's worth of music. But now it's more like just steady, regular, every day. So if I spend like an hour a day at painting, that's fine for me. But I have my music studio and my painting studio in the same room in my house. And so I'm looking at it. And while I'm looking at it, I'm reflecting on it and thinking, gee, maybe I should just touch this up a little bit or take this.
Mm.
So there's a little bit of extra contemplation. So I mean, I think I like the idea of taking time. And now these piano pieces, similarly, um, often taking like about a year to get them written, to me being able to play them, to recording them finally, so that it sounds like it's fluid enough to pass as a reasonable performance. Not the greatest pianist, but you know um I don't know what you say. It's like, I think of myself more as a music writer, and unfortunately, I have to also play it. So, because nobody else is going to do that, So that's where I'm at with that.
Well, they are beautiful, these
Thank you.
piano pieces.
Yeah,
And I really so I played piano when I was a kid. I picked it
yeah,
back up when I was 34, I believe, and we went through this whole period of change. Got
yeah.
really interested in Eric Satie's music and wanted to play
Oh,
that on the street. And
yes,
uh
wonderful.
and one of the great things about Satie is that it's simple and you can learn
Yes,
it. And
yes, yeah,
yeah, I really believe you don't have to be any kind of virtuoso
yeah,
to really effectively play piano or guitar. And although
yeah.
you play beautiful guitar, you've released, like an album of guitar music and guitar singles as well. That's also to me very impressive, the just being multi-instrumentalist as you are.
Well,
Uh,
guitar, when you do music school, you have to, usually you have to, the piano, if you're not a pianist, the piano has to become your second instrument. At least when I did. I mean, I'm pretty sure that happens now as well. But I mean, you get an assignment where you have to like analyze some kind of composition. you really can't do it on the guitar. You can go a little ways with some of that stuff or whatever other instrument, even violin. So you're sitting down at the piano and you're looking at a reduction of, a symphony or something. You're looking at how it looked before it was scored, and you're analyzing it. And that's part of what you have to do with getting through music theory courses. So piano
Mm,
playing is like something you had to do. So I mean, I had a piano when I was growing up as well, and a guitar. So I just go down and kind of fool around on it. And I did take lessons, and I actually was fortunate. I took lessons from pretty good players. So that and having gone through graduate school with classical guitar, it taught me a lot about how to work on performing, how to work a piece up to do performance, what is required of that, and methods and techniques for doing that. Starting slowly, maybe working it up slowly with a metronome. Really carefully look at the fingerings that you're using, these kinds of things in detail.
mm,
This is some of the stuff I'm doing now. Um, Harvest Bellride was done much more in an improvisational way,
mm,
where I would work on like section one day and the next day another section. And then eventually it was like, oh, okay, well, now I know what this piece is all about, and then bring it to conclusion. And it's just kind of a more improvisational way of writing music, where now it's a much slower, more deliberative. It's a very, you know, it's kind of like the old traditional classical music kind of way. That's
mm,
doing it now. They say that all music really and composing is really it's really all improvisation. It's just the matter of the rate at which you're doing it. Like
mm,
a jazz sax player is improvising on the spot, where somebody like Eric Satie is improvising, but it's taking a much slower kind of
mm.
amount of time to do it. And I appreciate what you say about Satie's a favorite of mine too. No Ciens, just
Oh yeah,
love those pieces. Oh my gosh, I love them. I love
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, and I say some of his stuff is simple, some of it's really difficult to play.
yeah.
That's pretty fascinating to me because just hearing a little bit about process and how long it takes to do one of these piano pieces.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what I would do, since I started playing piano on the street, I would take my keyboard out and just play. I started with Satie, and then I found, I don't have enough music to play out here for hours and hours. I have to improvise things. And so
Yeah.
I just kind of do it with, like playing, improvising on the street. Um,
Huh.
but the interesting thing is that I'm just fascinated by how you've created this music because for me, even learning a piece like a Satie piece was a big project, right? Like it was like a month-long project at times, sometimes months long, to just even learn the piece. And like you said, to come up with the right fingering for performance. And it's it to me it was is fascinating because their projects of me just taking someone else's work and putting it here so that it's there so that I can have it, you
Yeah.
know? And,
Yeah.
that's a whole thing. So even and then adding on to that composition, which I never did, like on paper, I did it somewhat in my brain, just messing
Yeah.
around. And interestingly, Jim, some of them kind of came from your ideas. Like I would sometimes try to recreate things that you had done. And then I was like, oh, I learned that little bit from Jim's piece. And then I created this other world from it. It's like a,
Oh, cool.
yeah. And just based on like what I could figure out, because I was really interested. I think that may have been one of the times that I reached out to you was just to inquire about how I could get my hands on your music.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That you see, nobody's ever really asked me for that, so it's not something that I've like kind of like keep around. It's like, but the thing of it is, I do all of the playing is done, because I have like a little, you know, home studio, which basically means you have a computer and it has a DAW on it, a digital audio workstation program on it for recording, and so that's much easier for me to deal with than, for example, having an actual piano and microphones and all that. So
Mm.
basically, I work on a digital keyboard, and I use very nice, piano sounds to layer over what I do. But it's all done initially in MIDI, a MIDI type language, and so they all of that stuff is still there. What the programs also do is they also can simply transform it into regular notes and staffs and stuff like that. But
Oh,
I
interesting.
haven't taken it that far, but it is there, you
I don't
know.
know if there's huge demand for it, but you'd get demand from me at least. Yeah. I think, people who probably compose music a lot, maybe like one instrument or something doing like, if they're like a massive artist, I imagine they probably get requests like that from time to time,
Yeah.
just people wanting
Oh
to,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about this meditation that you're doing
Oh
because,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because it seems to have become a huge part of your life, as you said. That's like number one. And also, I remember reaching out to you at one point, and you kind of shared uh, how you kind of became the person you were, and you shared this story of meeting these Buddhist monks, I
Oh
believe. And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder if you could share that and tell me a little bit about the meditation because several people have encouraged me that that is up at the top of things that
Yeah.
ground them,
Yeah.
center them. Yeah.
Yeah. I would have to say that it's certainly for me, it's not a quick process. The quickest way to if you really want to really taste it really strongly and you're in kind of like a hurry, that's like you do a retreat. Like you go to some, meditation center and do like a solid week. Even a
Mm,
solid week, you'll leave after a week, and for about 2 days the world will be very different because the power of your thinking and your emotion, where for most of us is way up here, after a week it comes down to here, and you have more clarity and openness, and it's not conceptual. It's just being. And then, but after a couple of days, it comes back up. So,
I
you,
see.
so you, so you, so that comes back, and so that's why I meditate a lot, because then this preoccupation with thinking and all the conceptual aspects of our mind. It kind of try to keep it lower. You know.
Mm.
For me, that requires a lot of time. That's just because I that's just who I am. And for some people, it would be much less time could bring it down.
So is it sort of like, quieting things down, like getting rid of distraction? Is that sort of it?
Well, okay. Well, I mean, uh, there are, boy, there's so many ways you could go. I would really like to say the best thing I could say right here.
Mhm.
But what's very hard to understand is that thinking, all of the thoughts we have, including all of the hard thoughts, the depressive thoughts, anxious thoughts, the scary thoughts, the fearful thoughts, all of the thinking and all of the emotions that are linked with it, and all the feelings that are linked with it, like maybe the pit in your stomach gets, and you feel tight, and your shoulders go up, and all these kinds of things. All of that, from the Buddhist point of view, these are clouds in the sky that are just floating by. And so the clouds are floating by, and it's like we look in the sky and all we're seeing is the clouds. From the Buddhist point of view, you open those clouds up and it's like a lot of space. So there's a huge space that's really below our thinking and our feeling and our emotions. And the Buddhists, for a simple way of saying it, might call this awareness or mindful awareness or mindfulness. And they might say clear, wise openness, or they might say open wisdom awareness, all these different kinds of things. It's just pointing the same idea that we have within us, an awareness that's very open and clear and spacious. and it resides below. It's down here, below all of the thinking and all of the mess that goes on in our heads, especially now when we're all so stressed about so much stuff, money and relationships and our politics and and is the
Yeah.
world going to even, exist because it's, things are falling apart right and left. And it's like, there's so many stresses and pressures, and these keep the mind churning with thoughts and emotion. But there really is a very spacious thing below that. So what happens after a while for really good meditators, when their thinking just becomes a reflection of that open spaciousness. So they meditate all the time, like not just when they sit down on a cushion for 10 minutes or something, but all of the time. That's like the Dalai Lama. That's what he's doing. He's
Mm.
meditating all of the time.
Hmm.
All and it's not like you're trying to like shut out being angry or being fearful, but it just no longer has that power over you because you've made sort of a very, very a shift in what is the word I'm looking for? When you do some sort of like very, very severe kind of shift. I can't think of it, but
Metamorphosis, perhaps, or
maybe something like that. But you do the shift, and so you kind of with practice exist more in the open clarity than you do more in your thinking concept. Try saying that to somebody who's like a a PhD professor in a university who spent their entire lives reading books and packing their head full of all this information, and they'll look at you like you're nuts. It's like, well, this is how you become more intelligent. You just pack your head with more and more information. Whereas the Buddhists would say, yeah, that's good stuff. And, it's good to be informed and it's good to be smart and it's good to know a lot of stuff. But try checking out learning about your awareness, and see where
mm,
that'll get you.
mm,
So, with awareness comes a lot of things, from the Buddhist point of view. This is also where you get into compassion and you get into peace and you get into friendliness. This sort of more, greater facilities that humans have. This is where that comes from, and it comes in, and at that point, it's not even like it's like for someone like the Dalai Lama, compassion isn't like, well, I'll like that person if they like me. It's like,
mhm,
well, I'll be nice to them if they're nice to me. It's not even like that at all. It's like just a very open feeling for everyone, even your enemies, even
mhm,
horrible people,
mm,
because what is going on with horrible people? They're really caught up in this web of thinking and emotion that makes them do just really bad, atrocious things.
right.
It's self-involvement. So I think awareness is more about it's more about openness. Yeah, it's more about being open in the world, not so self-centered. I mean, this is what I aspire to do. I'm not the Dalai
Mhm,
Lama's up here. I'm just way down there. So
right, right.
but, it's inspiration. So, I mean, that's like those are my heroes. The people that did that stuff are my
Yeah.
real heroes.
Well, it's interesting because when I reached out to you about stuff, I had no idea that that was some inspiration from you. I guess, honestly, I might have been able to hear it in your music, because there is some sort of like kind of meditative quality to it.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly, in the animal rights world, there is a lot of uh, Buddhist thinking, actually. So my buddy Wayne, who I co-started his YouTube channel with him, he's this great animal rights attorney. Um,
Yes.
and this is a spin-off channel of that YouTube show, and I've gone off on my own direction. But he considers himself a Buddhist, and I remember at one point he was someone who rescued animals and was facing time in prison for doing so.
Oh,
I remember him. We were in Wisconsin. He was facing jail time,
pooh.
and I remember knocking on his door one time because I was basically like his assistant at that time, his paralegal, and I was trying to, I'd always have things to bring to him. This happened one time. I remember knocking on his door and him saying, "Oh, I'm meditating right now. I'm
Mm,
meditating. Can you give me a little time?" So yeah, he
right.
was someone who practiced this, and then interestingly, I've seen other examples where there's this YouTuber. His name's David Rams. He's an animal rights guy, and he did this whole segment about this Buddhist guy, Sadhguru, in India. And he was saying that this guy was kind of like, he was kind of rude and insulting to this person who was asking him about dairy cows. And he said, here's this guy who's, claiming to be about peace and love and compassion, but really he's sort of, exploiting animals. Here's this example of this other guy, Thich Nhat Hanh, the
Oh,
Vietnamese Buddhist
yeah.
master, I guess you might say, who had this really compassionate view towards animals. And I just think that's an interesting thread, because a lot of the things, and I wasn't going to make this about like an animal rights topic, but a lot of the things that I hear in your music is this kindness, gentleness. And it doesn't surprise me that some of this is founded in your interest in Buddhism. I wonder if you could share that story too about uh, what that experience was like when you met those Buddhist guys.
Yeah, yeah. What it was is kind of, it was a very interesting kind of experience. I was, when we just out of college and nobody had any money, and so I was sharing an apartment with a friend who was a drummer, and we had similar tastes in a lot of things. And there was, at the university, there was going to be a presentation from a Tibetan monk, and we were like, "Oh, that's great. Let's go see. Let's see what he has to say." And it was like, I had another friend prior to that went off to a Buddhist monastery, but I mean, I kind of lost touch with him, and so maybe there was a little impulse because he was somebody I really liked, and so. We go to the presentation, and it's this Tibetan monk, and he's there in the maroon robes with the kind of gold interior, and he's sitting in a chair, and he has an interpreter. He's speaking in Tibetan, and I was just knocked out. I mean, I didn't understand a word he said. Of course, I was listening to the interpreter, but it was like his whole manner
Mm,
was so different from what I had seen up to that point. He's like very still, and so articulate, very, very clear. And I was just, wow, it really caught me because I had never been in the presence of somebody like that. I mean, it's like I've been in the presence of everybody you and I have always been in, or it's like you know, see, sometimes you got to really protect yourself out there, because
right,
I
right.
grew up in New York City, quite a bit, and I was down there a lot. And it's rough and tumble. You walk in the gas station, and the first thing the guy says to you is, "What the F do you want?" What the
Yeah.
F are you looking at? So I mean, that's where I grew
And
up,
there's Jim,
so
just like he's
well,
yeah.
at that point, I didn't know, so I'm like, I grew up in an Italian family, so I'm saying it right back to him, so I'm like,
Mm,
and it's not making me feel happy or anything, but I'm doing that.
right.
And but so here I'm going through college, and we go to see the Kempo speak, and that was really it. I mean, it wasn't even what he was saying, it was really how he was sitting there so quietly for like an hour, speaking so fluidly. I mean, we were both thinking, he sounds like a sax player, like improvising the way he sounds. It
Mhm.
was it very much took me. And so I started going to the local group that was connected with him. There's only a few people at the time, is kind of growing and learning more and more and more about it gradually. It's a slow process for me, I have to be quite honest. I was not like the best student, with meditation in the beginning. It took
Mm,
me a while to kind of catch on. It really did.
yeah.
And maybe about like 8 years before I did Harvest Bell Ride, I started doing a very complex practice, in Buddhism, in the Tibetan Buddhist school. Um, do you want me to mention it? What the
Yeah, yeah.
freak out some other people. The practice is called Nundro. It's Ngondro. So I started doing this practice then, and I'd have to say the practice took me 13 years to complete. It's
Oh,
a
wow.
big practice. And
Mm,
so by the end of that, I was like, okay, now I'm going to meditate a lot more, because now it made much more sense to me. But meditation really, I'd have to say one more thing about it. It really is progressive. So it's similar to like playing a piano, where maybe you'd start out playing, one note. I'm actually sitting in front of my piano, and
mm. Oh, nice.
play one note, and then maybe in the next week you're playing a tiny little scale, and then maybe 5 years later you're playing Satie, and then maybe 10 years later you're playing Beethoven, something like that. But
Mhm,
it's similar. It's there are progressive stages to meditation. There is. It
mm,
would be unfair to say it's simply like reflection, self-reflection.
mhm,
It
mm,
you kind of mull through it, and you stop, and you go a little higher, and you mull through that phase, and you stop, and you mull through a little bit more. It's like
mhm.
that. It's a long process.
It sounds to me like something that's difficult to articulate.
Mm.
But obviously, if you're talking about a project that would take you 13 years with this one particular thing that you're talking about, this is not something that you can, encapsulate, I'm sure, in like a paragraph. It sounds pretty complex. Um, well, I like that's interesting that you have brought up like kind of the space. Like it, this is something that you do hear in your music as well, which is something
Spacious.
that I imagine that people, it's like kind of like in a conversation where we have the tendency to want to fill every moment
Yeah.
because it can be uncomfortable if we let things be too silent. But I'm
Beautiful.
thinking about moments of silence in your music that really brings out the
Yes.
feeling.
Yes.
Um, and
Yeah.
one that did stand out to me was that it's one that I pinpointed that does have like animals in the title as Dear Surrender, which is
Oh,
actually this very mournful sounding piece that has a lot of space and there's sound throughout the space, but it's quite
yeah.
very quiet. What was that piece about? I'm very curious.
Boy, I'm not sure I can bring, retrieve where it was at when I did that song.
Mm,
What I I know that I wanted to do I, it's interesting. I think for me what happens is what I'm learning at the time. I try to bring all of that together and try to use that as a beginning energy for doing something like a music piece like As Dear Surrender. And so, I think I was, um, we moved to this place and there are a lot of deer here. So it's kind of
mm,
been something that had been on my mind. I mean, we have like 15 deer in our yard sometimes. It's like there's
nice.
like a herd out there. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And then a deer one time left. It's little. What do you call a little deer? Do you know? I forget what they call.
Like a herd or like,
Like a tiny, like 4-week old baby. Baby deer.
oh,
Yeah.
probably a fawn, I
A
guess,
fawn.
or a
Yeah.
doe. I don't
A
know.
doe,
I'm not
right.
sure.
So somebody left, one of the deer left their little fawn, right near our kitchen door.
Oh,
we,
wow.
we can go out. That's the door we used to go in and out of the house. And we're like, okay, well, we better not do that now, because we've got a guest here and we're going to freak them out if we go out this door and scare the poor little fawn. But so the deer are a big deal in this area. And so it was something
Mm,
that was on my mind. And, unfortunately, there's the tragedy of, you get a deer hit by a car,
right,
and there's hunters. I'm not really a big. I'm like, I'm just not into hunting thing. I just don't get that at this point.
right.
It just doesn't. You're, as an animal rights person, we probably have similar sensibilities about that one. But
For sure.
gosh,
Yeah.
ah, dear. So it was trying to get at this idea of um, um, losing life, in a
Yeah.
tragic, poignant way. So it's almost for animals. It's almost like they have no choice. It's like I mean, we've had many dogs, and we've been with the dogs when they pass. It's just a whole different thing. It's harsh. It's
Yeah. Very
poignant.
harsh. Well, that's such a beautiful answer, and I I feel like I got that from your piece. Like, I was wondering, did this have just something to do with hunting? Obviously, like many of the ways that we experience deer or stories about deer are that they are hunted or that they've
Mm.
been hit by a car on the road.
Yeah,
And so I feel like I definitely got that just also from the title, but also just in the tone of the piece, which is why I feel like, in many ways, you are this expert communicator because you did convey this to me, even without me having that explanation from you. I feel like much of your music can be open to interpretation, but you also are communicating pretty specific feelings and emotions. I feel like, in ways that, while you could apply it, as I did,
yeah,
to the novels that I was reading very effectively. Um, you could also apply it in other ways. And I guess that's one of the things that is so nice about music. It's this communication, but it's
yeah,
this very open, kind of back to that word that you used, a kind of an open communication.
yeah.
Yeah. But
Um, yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, there's two things that bring up in my mind, and this is the idea of space, and I definitely think of space as being a very, very important component in the work that I do. So that's something that I've always kind of understood, and this came a little bit from working with my friend Richard Lanehart. He's on Spotify too. I mean, he passed away, but
Hmm.
very out there kind of musician, Richard Lanehart.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
He
look
worked
that
in
up.
New York City quite a bit, and uh, but there's space, and then there's also the idea of within a composition of trying to really ring the same bell over and over. So it's kind of like eating a chocolate bar. It's like you're eating a chocolate bar, and it's the same thing through while you're eating it. So you're eating
Mm,
chocolate, 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 chocolate. So I have this idea, where you want to have a sort of consistency in a composition. So if I hit on like a phrase or something, and to me it strikes me as having a particular emotion, it's like my job then is to keep that going, and
mm,
just reinvent that. That's
mm.
it's really kind of a simple idea. It's kind of like, I mean, if I was using an extreme example, it would be like, well, if you're going to be angry, really be angry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're just going to be angry for 5 minutes. And this
Right.
is kind of like, you're going to be kind for 5 minutes. So this
Right,
is
right,
like
yeah.
the idea in the music, is trying to keep it consistently on the same emotional tone, and maybe if it varies, have it vary in a way that somehow or other makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sort of brings you back to that,
Yeah.
and sustains that emotion. Oh, that's yeah, it's really, thank you for sharing. Like, I'm very interested in, the process that you've gone through and, um, in forming these pieces because they are such interesting things. I'm curious, what are the things that in your writing? Because since I've applied this so much to short, like to novels, I'm wondering what these short, and yeah, please send them to me. But I'm curious, like, what are some of the themes that you've been experimenting with in your writing?
um well, let's see. Right now, my wife Jane is she's working on bringing native plants into our yard, right? So
Mm,
she's trying to get plants that weren't really meant for this uh, part of the country. And I'm in upstate New York, and
mm,
so she's bringing in native plants. So I'm writing a little short story about someone who's kind of doing this as a nurturer, and then um, the reasons why they do that. So that's what the present story is about. Then I had some stories that were kind of influenced by the present day politics. No, I didn't probably
mm.
don't want to go too far into that, but
Well, I don't know if my viewer, like I feel like most of my viewers would be pretty progressive. I think from looking
yeah,
back at your Facebook over the years that you're
yeah,
not too much of a fan of the current administration, and you and I agree on that.
yeah.
Yes.
No, it's difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
I think of like so I was writing actually some little like horror stories, horror fairy tales that were based on really crazy kings. you know,
Nice, nice.
there's one king that just was insatiable, and so he'd get everything, and eventually he took all of the money of the village, and there was no more even money left, so the people were just bartering, their
Mm,
services to live on. And once he got it, he was like bored. So it was only an acquisition of getting stuff that made him happy. And so
mm,
he works with some magicians and some doctors, and they figure out a way for him to acquire everyone's happiness, right? So he has to take this special potion, and then he goes up to people and he embraces them and he takes away all of their happiness. And
wow.
so and then I wrote a story about a couple and their interest, as individuals, their interest, they saw the world through numbers. So
Mm,
so when this looked at the world and see the distances between things, and see how much something weighed and how tall somebody was, and how much something cost. And so the world was all seen through this eye of numbers. And actually there's a it turns out, after I wrote the story, that there is an actual a thing for that. There is some sort of like mind state for that. And then he meets a woman who similarly has this kind of thing. She's bowling, but she's not bowling to score points or anything. She's scoring to create particular, like numerical ratios, like
whoa,
Fibonacci
interesting.
theories or something. And so they meet each other, and then they talk to each other in terms of like, they say numbers to each other, like four, the quaternity, which is like this number of like perfection. And um,
Hmm.
so it's just little silly stories like that. That's what I'm
That's
doing.
that's awesome. That's really interesting. Isn't it? Yeah, not to get too political, but isn't it interesting?
Oh,
You mentioned the acquisition and stuff, and doesn't
yeah.
it seem to me like people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who have all the money in the world, do
Yeah.
not seem to be very happy, do they? And you could compare them with your, sort of monkish people who live very Spartan lifestyles with very little, uh, what's the material gain and stuff,
Right.
and seem to
Right.
be much more content.
Yes. Isn't that true? I mean, I think that was part of the allure of Donald Trump, was that he was sort of this majestic representation of like the extreme of materialism at its extreme,
Mm,
so that everything is some sort of negotiation that lands you a product. It seems like, I mean, reading lately where he wants to he's willing to let people off the hook and get them out of jail and give them pardons, but you got to pay for it. It's just like,
right.
nothing is, there's nothing that's sacred. I mean, it's very disturbing to me. What's
Yeah.
disturbing to me is not so much, it has to do with, I think to myself, well, I mean, I see this in him. Doesn't everybody else? And apparently, no, well, they do not.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
so you think, well, why is that? And then of course we get into very, very complex things. It's the information that they're hearing. What is Fox News doing to you? What is
Mhm.
Breitbart doing to you? It's like, what are you hearing? You're hearing a particular slant of information, and it's been cultivated for years and years and years.
Right.
I was looking at actually some uh, Pew Research information today, and was saying that it's interesting because when you look at the information, Donald Trump really represents minority, views on things.
Right.
This whole thing about immigrants, it's like most Americans, don't see like being born in America as like something that matters about, you being an American. The majority
Mm.
don't. It's something like 30 something percent think that way. And the majority don't really care if you don't speak English. I mean, well, actually, not that one, not so much about speaking English. Most people want people to speak English, but even among Republicans and Democrats, there's a big difference. It's like
Mm.
most Republicans, 80% want that. It's closer to like 50% with Democrats. But no, I mean, there's so much you could say about this period and this epic. It's harsh. It's very, very harsh. I think the biggest concern for many people is just the environment. You get back to the environment, you get back to global warming, you get back to this issue of like, well, this planet that's, we have, which is the only one we have, and where are we going to do? I mean, I
Mhm.
don't think living on Mars is really an option,
Yeah.
but, uh, you know, uh, no, and incidentally, I was looking at some other thing where now it's thought that you could stay on Mars but only for a very limited amount of time. I mean, there's radiation. I mean, our world is configured for us so that, we're not getting the kind of radiation that like can kill us. I mean,
Mm.
and even if you were to go out in a sunny day and stand out naked outside and you get sunburn, that's really bad in itself. But I mean, being on Mars, it's like, whoa, it's much worse.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, there's so many things you can say about it and it's just so disheartening.
Right.
That was a hard one.
Yeah, well, I had, back in the day when I was doing, like, political reporting, I remember interviewing this local Democratic politician here, and he said to me, he's like, "Jeremy, like, a buck gets around, but the water is forever." And he was
Yeah.
talking about just basically what you're saying, like, can we endure the damage of, a disastrous presidency or political period? In some ways we can, but can the planet, can the animals, can, life? So yeah, it is very disheartening. And it's interesting you brought up English because when I had that thought when you were talking about piano, like you said, everybody has to learn piano. I was thinking, oh, so like it's like piano is like the English, like for like other people in the world. You know how it's interesting when you go to other parts of the world and many people know English,
Right.
and yet as Americans, so few of us know other languages, but English
Right.
is that one. It's like the piano of the world, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. 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 Gosh. Oh boy, what a thing.
Well, how is the political, situations informed, if at all, the music that you've been writing? Because now we did 4 years of, President Trump before, now we're in year 5, I guess you might say, and then, so I know you from your social media that you're sensitive to that. Has that sort of anxiety or, depression seeped into your art in any ways?
Yeah. Back before I started doing just strictly singles, which is really the way that music is kind of uploaded these days. The CDs and streaming is so big. So before doing singles, I did one CD called Pagliacci. And on that I was writing songs. And I was trying to write goofy songs. I don't know. I was trying to just somehow or other make sense of it. This was around 2017, 2018. So Trump won.
Hmm.
And I was titling the songs, Grifter and
Oh yeah.
Jailed, and there was like a whole series of songs that I was trying to have a little bit of a political link to. I mean, I listen to them now and they're kind of funny to me, but that it was just my way of very lightly trying to make a statement about it, and
Mm.
that's right about when I got connected and into Spotify. So it's unfortunate. The thing with Spotify, most of the time, it's always about what's happening right now. So, the latest thing is the thing that kind of generates interest. And, y- you know, um, some of my older work doesn't get listened to as much as I wish it would,
Mm.
but that's just the way it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been interested in sort of following your musical career too, how that has shifted because yeah, like you said, now you put those singles out. So like just the other like last month you
Yeah.
released 3 piano tracks 1 week after the next. They were beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
and the way that I've always listened to music is, well, since like having smartphones and stuff, I get Amazon Music. I
Yeah.
buy music onto my phone. Even that's been changing and stuff. And so what I do now is, since you put out basically singles, I basically form albums of your
Yes.
music myself. So I have like a Jim Sande playlist
Oh,
that
thanks.
that I
Yeah.
use for reading the latest Murakami novel or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it in some ways, yeah, that is depressing, I think, actually, though, because I kind of miss the album, the
Yeah.
concept of like you mentioned, an hour long collection of ideas or one singular idea that
Right.
threads through this entire work. And
Yeah.
yeah, but like you said, it's just the way it is. Do you what was your favorite time period for this kinds of stuff, or are you just like whatever, I'll just go with the flow, whatever?
Um, I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Do you mean in terms of me, my time for me, or just how?
No, in terms of
Oh,
like how like you mentioned, I guess you've sort of answered this already, that you sort of regret how nowadays like people are not listening to your older music as much. Or
yeah.
do you have a nostalgia for the time before when we had like, albums and that sort of thing that were
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying.
yeah.
Um, I'm actually I'm actually kind of person that just, I do go with a lot of present ideas. I mean, when Spotify came out and that became more and more popular, and all the music was gravitating towards that. That's kind of like how I listen really now. I mean, I listen a lot on YouTube. I do listen on Spotify somewhat, but mostly YouTube, and I really go um, piece to piece. I mean, if there's something that catches me, and then I really like it, then I'll like follow through and listen to more of that person's work. I was listening to a band, this Asian women. I'm trying to think of the name of the band. Let me see if I can quickly find it.
Yeah.
Otto Boke Beaver. Did you see those guys?
Never heard of that.
Yeah. Oh
Auto.
my gosh, it's like if the Ramones went crazy, It's just like
Yeah.
it's just they're just delightful, and I just love it. So I mean, it's like, well, I'm going to listen to more of that. And they did like a little desk concert, thing. What is that
Oh,
called?
the Tiny Desk concert thing?
Tiny desk concert,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, it's about 20 minutes long. And it's just they're crazy. They're just
Nice.
it's just delightful. I mean, what I got out of it more than anything was their energy, the music, the actual sounds they were doing, not so much, but their energy of it and how it's
I
well put
see.
together, very much so. It was like, I don't know, it's like looking at crinkled paper or something. It was really crazy. And I
Mm.
kind of like that right now. I think that that's an idea that's floating around. And for me, it's an idea that's being big. It's just like trying to somehow or other make sense out of something that's incredibly random, and trying to pull it apart and make sense out of something that's random. I just see that as an aesthetic that's coming through in some ways. That's a hard one for me to, real hard one for me to explain. But
Mm.
these guys seem to have that to me. Yeah.
You mentioned a friend of yours, Richard Lanehart, a couple of
Yes.
times. So I imagine you guys had a pretty close working relationship, or
Yeah.
yeah. What? Tell me a little bit about that guy. I'm curious.
Richard was he was same age as me, and we went through college in the same time, and we were in the music department here at State University of New York at Albany. Now I believe it's called Albany University, or I think. But
Mm.
there's a SUNY system, a State University of New York system of colleges, and there's colleges and universities. Albany has a university. There are other universities, a Buffalo University, Stony Brook, and Binghamton University, Harper College. Um, and so we were in the music department, and that music department was very progressive.
Mm.
Um, there was actually a Moog studio in that, and this is in the 70s. In the late 70s, you'd go in, and we were working with dials and chords. It was not computerized the way it is now, but I mean, it was like old school Moog stuff. And I would sit there and I would plug stuff in and try and come up with sounds. And the teacher would come in and evaluate me, and I'd turn it on, and then I'd be like, looking at him and see what kind of reaction I get out of him. But
Yeah.
but he was a master of this stuff. He got really into it. And afterwards, we played in bands, and he was in a successful band up here, and he made a living working in a band. And they did, I think, like swing type music. And I knew his wife as well, and she was a dancer, and she's a very good friend of mine as well. And he moved down to New York City, and in New York City, he started playing in all the various areas, basically electronic music. So he'd show up with his keyboards and his synthesizers and play this very, out there electronic music stuff. I mean,
Mm.
talk about a form of music that nobody, is listening to. If I'm being listened to this much, that's being listened to this much.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's it's um it's not there. I mean, there are people that do this, but I mean, a lot of it was very much influenced by the history of music. You get John Cage, and then
Yeah.
from John Cage, you kind of branch off in different directions in a way. And this was like the direction that branched off into the realm of like electronic music that was less, not really based in beats and not so much based in tonality. So you have, do re mi fa sol la ti do. This is not part of it. The idea was to kind of progress, make a progression with music as it is, and sort of figure out new ways of doing it. So when
Mm.
this is part of the history of music, you go from Mozart and you go to Beethoven, you go to Brahms, you go to Eric Satie.
Mm.
Before that, Debussy. You go to Copland, you go to Charles Ives, and you get to John Cage, Phil Glass, and you,
Hmm.
you see the kinds of like progression that they're trying to reformulate music, and so they're trying to reformulate music using electronic sounds and the inventions of the time, which was this Moog synthesizers. So actually these people would get very, very annoyed when they'd see like a rock band like Yes, go on stage in the late 70s with a synthesizer and play tonal music, play
Mm.
music that just was like, I'd play a C chord on a Moog synthesizer, and so they get very upset about that. And it's just like, you're taking this instrument that can like make music, go out there. But the problem is, it's always the same problem. There's what's popular and what can sustain someone,
Right.
professionally, and this kind of thing. So these are all kinds of questions that musicians, that are composers face. Um,
Mm.
it's like, can you make a buck at it? Can you get by or not?
Right.
This
Right.
kind of thing is important. So, I was able to at least do that part time, so that's how I did it. But I also live in upstate New York. So, I mean, I'm not in New York City, although I was in New York City.
So not having those huge expenses and stuff. You also mentioned Philip Glass, and that
Mhm.
was also someone whose music I played on the street at times. A couple of pieces of his. Um, you said you got to meet him. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was really great. This was in the 90s. I was this it was revolving around Buddhism, and I was writing
Oh,
for this little publication, and I started interviewing uh, monks,
mm,
and I'd ask them questions, and I transcribe it and edit it, and then it'd be part of the publication. It was a local Buddhist publication, and it would, we'd actually just put it everywhere. We'd put it in stores and stuff. Anybody could take it and get it. So then I started thinking, well, I'm gonna see if I can just reach out a little bit and go into the world of like Buddhist personalities and see if I could interview some of these people. And so I just out of on a lark, I just tracked him down. I think I spoke with his manager or somebody, and what I wanted to do, talk about Buddhism, and so I got the green light. He said, sure. And
nice.
so I spoke with him on the phone. And at the time, I had like a little recorder. You could record off of a phone. Um, and the little tiny, tiny little cassette tapes. And and then he was up here and playing. And so he invited me to come and meet him. And so I went, and we sat down and chatted a little bit. This is before he did a solo performance. And when he did the solo performance, he would play, I think, a lot of times the same music. He would play these metamorphosis pieces. And
Yeah.
there's a book actually, and it has the pieces written out that he would perform in his solo performances. He also
Mm,
came up here a few times with his ensemble as well.
mm,
This is very nice. I mean, very charming, extremely charming, humble man.
mm.
You'd think, wow, here's this guy. He's like, in the edge of music. I mean, you can't help but listen to a movie now, and you'll hear the formulations that he used in the way the music is, being heard in movies. It's been like that for a long time.
Yeah.
Just so influential. I mean, what I really, really liked about him was how he just really, really dissected music down to some extremely basic, intricate little motifs, and then rebuilt from there. It's like
Right. Right. Yeah.
he took it down to a brick. It's like you look at a brick edifice, and he took it down to a brick. And then he was like, well, I'm going to figure out a new way of rearranging these bricks. This
Yeah.
da 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 motif that you would hear in his music. Um, it was great. I love it.
Yeah, that's a interesting way of describing it, because and a good way of describing it, because yeah, he would have these, like repetitive kind of things that just kind of built and grew and shifted, and but very similar. And that was why one of his pieces was one, and I can't remember which one it was. I'd have to go back and look, but it was just very simple. Like you learned how to play, and then you just moved around. You learned how to play the pattern, and you just moved it around on the keyboard essentially,
Yeah.
and it became just really fascinating sounding. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, there's something about that he did, and just in the shifting of like one note here and there, and how he could just all of a sudden get a very beautiful change and layer, unexpected harmonic change. It's just so lovely and moving, just
yeah,
it's very, very subtle movement. Very, very lovely. It's
yeah,
unfortunately, that's one thing we don't get to hear too much. We don't get to hear this kind of harmonic creativity. You know, People want to
unfortunately.
do that. They want to do that. I think they do.
Well, I think you do that. I hear that in your music.
I'm
And
trying. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So just to give people like kind of like some of my favorites, like Harvest Bell Ride, of course, is
Oh,
like such a classic to me. Particle has beautiful tracks on there. Silver, you put out more recently, was kind of a return. I think you even said that this was sort of like some of the tracks that didn't make it onto Harvest Bell Ride. Am I right about that?
Um, I I don't think so. I think
Oh,
that
okay.
that was a few years later. That was like 20, that was like about 7 years later. I have one, it's funny, when I did that piece, that CD, there was a track on it that I said to Jane, when I pass away, play this track at my,
Mm.
if there's a little memorial for me, play it, and because I think it's pretty good, and it's great because I don't know how this happened, but all of a sudden it's like my most popular piece on Spotify now.
Oh,
It
interesting.
made me
Which
very.
one is that?
It's called Per Te, which simply means
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
It was like for you, meaning whoever listens to it.
Yeah. I think that's actually one of the pieces that I asked you about, per te. And it may be the one that I ended up playing a little piece of. So at one point, when I was trying to figure out how to play your music, and when we're talking about Silver and Harvest Bell Ride, these aren't mostly piano pieces. These are like full compositions, like you said, with the like the sounds of like real, like all these instruments. And I think I asked you, do you have like a way that I could play this? And you said something like, I think like you could probably do a version of that, because I think I was asking you for sheet music or something. And what I ended up doing was uh uh, hiring out the work. There was this like thing where like there was a service where you could send this company a track of music and they will transcribe it into sheet music for you. And I
Oh,
did that with
wow.
one of your pieces. I think it was Per Te. And they sent me a pretty decent version on piano. And while I didn't learn the entire thing, for whatever reason, I learned little pieces of it that I liked. And that's where I said, like, I learned a little bit of that piece, and that became part of something that I improvised and turned into like sort of like my own thing. It's kind of interesting.
Very
So
nice.
yeah, and
Cool.
it's interesting because yeah, that one definitely stood out to me, and I was wondering if you were going to say that
Yeah,
specific track, because
yeah.
yeah, because I listened to them, like in sequence so much that I'm not always learning the individual track names of all of your songs, but that
Sure.
was one that stood out to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes. Well, not like you're gonna have a funeral anytime soon, but it should be played. It should be played.
Well, each day it comes closer, but,
To both.
if I can put in a plug for myself here, it'd be like if somebody's listening to this and you go on Spotify or something else, listen to Per Te and, just sit back and relax, because it's
Yeah,
for you.
it is so beautiful. Yeah, yeah, and I s
Yeah.
I remember it's the same thing that I said. It's like you and Murakami, like, collaborating together. I remember the album Silver came out right at the right time for a new book of his that came out. So I very much associate it with that novel. And I'm actually blanking on the name of the novel right now, but I remember just that enriching that experience again, just as Harvest Bell, right, and all the other had done for me so much. It's kind of to the point you're saying, like, yeah, if you could do this, like, if you're out there, go listen to Per Te. And I've been telling people, if you're going to read Murakami, make sure you read it with Jim Sande, or it's not complete. It's just not. That's
That's
interesting.
great. Thank
Yeah,
you. That's really
yeah.
very nice of you. It's very, very nice. Per te was the idea was that to write a piano concerto,
Oh wow.
which is just a piano and orchestra kind of extended piece. That's all. That's
Mm.
that's what it was. Yeah.
So if you're someone who was, like, taught classical guitar, and you said that piano is something that didn't come super naturally to you, why is it that you have released so many solo piano tracks along with guitar tracks?
Yeah, the thing of it is, I think that part of that is that uh most of the work I've done has been done on a keyboard, Harvest Bell Ride, and then the CDs I did before that, when I started putting out CDs around 2000, and uh, so I think the whole process of like how I work and what I use to uh, write music on. A lot of it was really it came about on the keyboard. So I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's part of it, is that and there's really a very, very kind of like there's really kind of like a selfish thing about it too, and which is that to do a classical guitar track, you will not believe how hard it is.
Mm,
It's just to do a nice performance live on the classical guitar, and I'm recording it myself, but to get it to sound decent, and the performances, there's it's harder for me to do that, actually. I have
mm,
right now, I usually have like a backlog of about, a dozen to a dozen and a half pieces I'm aiming to record and
mm,
haven't. And I have several classical guitar pieces that I've really been kind of like, well, what lazy about getting it done. It's easier for me to record in the piano, but I use the piano to do a lot of writing. So
mm,
I'm not sure why, but that's partly it. I do
mm,
write music when the classical guitar pieces that I write, I do write them on the guitar. But the thing about classical guitar is hard, and it's hard. And I like hearing some of the new guys and new women playing on the guitar. They do all kinds of crazy things, tapping, all kinds of techniques, getting different sounds out of it. But the guitar in my mind, it wants to be in one key. It's sort of like it wants to stay. If you're playing with a drop D note, D, A, D, G, B, E. If you're playing with that drop D, you want to play a D chord, and the
mm,
piece and the song needs to be around D. But harmonically, it's harder to like find those like chords that kind of make that nice kind of shift on the guitar. It's a little bit trickier,
mm,
so I still haven't resolved that one yet. I mean, what one thing that I'm my planning on doing is I'm planning on getting back to like doing something like piano and classical guitar duo kind of thing, or maybe piano, classical guitar, two classical guitars and bass, or something like that. But that's my plan, is to get back to multi-tracking a little bit, um,
mm.
and use classical guitar. The idea being that I'm not using any more virtual instruments. I'm going to just do live instruments. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, I'm excited to hear what's coming. As
Yeah.
I always am, and it's funny because I'll just like check in, like in the past, how it's been. Like I'll just like every year or so, I'll just check in to see did Jim release any new music. I'm usually rewarded. There's usually at least a few tracks out there, and they were always so rewarding to listen to. Um, what? Tell me a little bit about performing because I associate you so much with composing. And I don't know anything about your performances if you do very many, and I'm wondering how challenging it might be because you're like if you're composing things like Harvest Bell Ride, which are these multi-instrumental things, how do you can you perform them, and so how do your performances typically go if you do?
Yeah. There are maybe like two or three pieces at the most that I've played for my CDs with. I have an ensemble, the Jim
Mm.
Sande ensemble. It's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and we've played. It's gone through a lot of like changes over, and that started around 1990 as well. And I still play with the same guys. We're good friends, and part of it is we really just like playing together. So they'll come over here and we'll play, and it's like um, we talk politics. It's
Hmm.
kind of like instead of guys getting together and playing poker,
Oh
we get
yeah.
together and play a song. But no. I when in the 80s, I did a lot of performing with rock bands, and we were
Mm,
popular around here and got to open up for touring groups and stuff like that. Um,
nice.
got a little bit of attention, people that wanted us to tour with them, but it's kind of hard because it's kind of hard to get. 5 people are on the same page, especially when
Mm,
you're in their 20s.
yeah.
I did a lot of performing, and at the time I was doing a lot of wedding stuff and just society kind of dates on classical guitar. So I'd play cocktail parties, I'd play wedding receptions, and play classical guitar in the background. I was the go-to classical guitarist. I did a lot of that.
Mm,
The ensemble was like tip of the hat to the Phil Glass ensemble because I just so much love them, and so it was like the Jim Sande ensemble, and then we were working on instrumental music. And we
mm,
did an
mm,
operetta, got a few singers, and we played them in the universities around here.
mm,
In the recent years, this is really weird. Uh, I had a friend who's learning how to become a singer. This woman who's very talented, and I heard a voice, and I think she can be a singer. So she came and became our singer out of like having no experience. And
mm.
so over time, she got better and better, and she wanted to do country music. So
Oh,
we
nice.
learned
Nice.
we learned a couple of sets of country music. We playing this out in a couple of bars. It was kind of on the road again, it's like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Playing on my Stratocaster, and I was playing twangy guitar and stuff like that.
Sounds like you have a lot of fun with it, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was more about that. But no, I haven't really done and these piano pieces or any of that stuff. I haven't
Mm.
performed that. I've been asked to do that. But no,
Oh,
it's
I
like,
see.
yeah, I can't, I don't know what I would do. And what do I do? I go there and I turn on the computer and then play like one of the parts. It's like, yeah, I don't know if I like that idea.
Yeah, it would be challenging, I imagine. Yeah. I mean, even like I said, trying to, transcribe some of your music to piano was challenging, but yeah, it was kind of rewarding. It definitely was a rewarding experience. You mentioned that you have done this part-time. I'm curious. I'm not trying to give
What
all
did I
your
do?
personal information. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
curious what you did for a living. Yeah.
Sure. I was a contractor. I remodeled apartments, and I remodeled houses, and it
Okay.
was mostly renovation and remodeling type work.
Oh, okay.
And I when I retired a few years back, I was renovating an apartment complex.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is the kind of thing I was doing. So we would go in and destroy the kitchens and the bathrooms and put in new kitchens and bathrooms. And the thing of it was, when I was a young man, I was just a very energetic person. And
Mm,
so the idea of sitting down in an office was very, very unappealing to me.
yeah.
So I had a lot of energy, and I mean, I would even as a carpenter, I would take off in the middle of the day and go play basketball,
Oh, yeah,
at
yeah.
the Y, and then go back and work. And then at night I'd be playing music and working on my music stuff.
Mm.
And that's kind of like how I lived for a long time.
Did you struggle at all with the energy when you're in a studio working on music, or was that like an energetic output?
Oh yeah, that was always a lot of fun and energetic. Yeah.
I
There's
see. Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot of music that I recorded that didn't that's I mean, I think these CDs, and even recently, that only really represents like about 50% of or less of what the music that I've written and even
Mhm.
recorded. I've been reluctant to put out things. I actually, my wife is an artist, and she's kind of like my go-to consultant. So it's like, is this worthy of putting out, and she'll say, yeah, yeah, put that one out. And then she's done that to me and said, this is terrible, isn't it? And she goes, no, no, you should put that one out.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah.
people, I don't know, I mean, when I do it, I think I mean, when you're doing something, and sure, this, when you're involved in some project, it's like you just really love it, and you love what you're doing, and you're lost in the process. And if it ends up being a stinker at the end, it's like, hey, it's okay. The
Mhm.
process
Yeah.
was good. So there's always a learning, to it, I think. Yeah. So
Did
that is
she
that thing. Yeah.
did she ever nix ideas for you? Like, she ever tell you, no, 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 don't put that one out."
she 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 With paintings and with art, with visual work, yes,
Oh, I
she's.
see.
I can always tell, and I go show her something, and she doesn't say anything, and that's her way of saying, "Forget about it," you know.
She didn't
That's-
want to say it. Well, your paintings are great. I mean, I
Thank you.
see them like you said, like I said, with your singles releases. They're nice, lovely additions to the singles, and give you like a little sense of the mood and the feeling that I think you were going for. So, yeah, I definitely would encourage you to someday. Here's my advice. Someday, release that like a B sides and say like, this is all the stuff that I left on the cutting room floor. And even if it's just for Jeremy, but Jeremy is always fiending for music, new music. So yeah, you could always do it that way, because then people don't expect it to be like the best if you're not confident about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of that. You know, I was reading about. I think I was reading about Hopper and how one of the museums had like a huge selection of his work, and they kind of graded it, you know, A, B, C, D, you know. So I
Mm-hmm.
think this is something, you know, we don't see the stinkers so much, you know, they don't make it through history.
Right, right.
I know a lot of artists did stinkers, you know, they did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, so many artists, and like especially with my piano journey, kind of starting with Satie, he was someone who wasn't appreciated even in his lifetime, I believe, and it was until much later that he found like real success after he was
Yeah.
dead and gone. And
There was
and
this, yeah.
yeah,
Let me just interject quickly. There's a story one of my music teachers, Joel Chatterby, told us. And Chatterby was a really, really wonderful composer, and he was very progressive. And he said there's a story about how Stravinsky was offered, a piece. He was offered so much money to write a piece for some particular situation. I really don't remember what that was. And
mm,
Stravinsky said, "No, no, no, I can possibly do it. It's not enough money, you know." And
uh-huh.
Satie was approached, and Satie was, "Oh, that's way too much money, you know. I'll do it for less." But I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm surprised by that because as I understood it, like Satie lived in pretty abject poverty for much of
yeah.
his life. So I'm surprised he didn't take the money, but he was an unusual guy, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, really special, you know, I think one of the best, you know, I mean, if you think about that period, you gotta like, I mean, Satie, wow, just wonderful. This early 20th century to slightly around World War II-ish kind of era, and wonderful
Mm,
for
mm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff was really incredible, and yeah, definitely sort of inspired. I would think that Philip Glass would say that Satie inspired him to some extent, and um, inspired a lot of us, I guess. But yeah, that's sort of how I got started on my sort of refining piano, and
Oh,
in some way that didn't exactly bring me to you, because I was listening to your music for a lot much previous to that, but it definitely kind of brought me, I guess you might say, spiritually closer to you, in reaching out and inquiring about your music, and being curious about how you formulated it and where it came from. So anyway, it's been so great
yeah.
getting to talk to you. And I
Oh,
always ask this to people who I have on my program. And with you, I'm almost even more interested to know, because I'm always curious just where all this comes from. But what are some of the books that you read? Like some of the, I don't know, the films that inspire you, anything that you look to for inspiration in music or whatever.
yeah, you know, it's interesting. I'm reading a book by Joe Roman, and you might want to check it out too. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
being
Joe
an
Rogan.
animal rights activist.
Interesting.
The title is a little raw, but
Hmm.
book I'm reading is called "Eat, Poop, Die" by Joe Roman. And in fact, I you know, I was so impressed. I did what you do. I sent him an email because they had his email address in there, and he wrote back, and I was like, whoa, my hero,
Yeah, yeah.
boy,
We
this
all
guy,
have them.
he really so I mean, I think you could say animal behavior and animal science right now is something I'm very interested in. Really am.
Mm,
I mean, something like 80% of the mammals that are the walking mammals now, the ones that walk, uh, are basically for food.
yeah,
You know,
right. Yeah,
something like only 4% of walking mammals on the face of the earth now are wild.
right.
4%. It's like, what do you say that when you're doing a poll, and it's within the margin of error? It's like within the margin of error is the number of animals that are in the wild that are mammals that walk on all fours.
Right,
I mean,
right.
he's this book he's got is just chock full of stuff. This is very interesting to me. I read a lot of Buddhist books as well,
Hmm.
so I usually have about 3 or 4 books that I'm reading at the same time. So right now I'm reading Joe Roman. I'm reading a book by Trangu Rinpoche about meditation practice, and it's
Hmm.
a kind of very, very. It's on progressive stages of meditation. It's very, very interesting. And now, so I'm reading a book now. It kind of got me interested in. There's a thing called the Abhidharma, which is Buddhist psychology, and Buddhist psychology is very, very, very extensive. I mean, it's really quite a developed thing. It it's unfortunate that it's not looked at, but
Mm,
through that, I also through studying that, I'm taking a year-long course on that. Um, Through studying that, I've also become interested in Tibetan medicine, which utilizes some of the same ideas. So I'm reading a book on Tibetan medicine. Um,
mm.
in terms of movies, like I, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the movie, but did you see the movie Nobody?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Nobody,
Nobody.
yeah, he's like this guy who was like a underground operative, and he's just trying to live a very, very ordinary life. But he's got all of these amazing fighting skills. But it's so over the top that the violence isn't disturbing because it's so
So
ridiculous.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. So that movie is very. Of course, The Big Lebowski always comes to mind as a movie. I mean, how fun was that movie?
Mm, mm,
It's just I wish I had some really good highlights for you. But I mean, I did the same thing when I was in college and I was studying music and art. You took some film courses, and of course you studied D.W. Griffith and
mm,
Stroheim and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I I I look at movies now, and I watch them sometimes when I'm practicing fundamentals on guitar, like arpeggios and scales. I don't mind doing that while I'm watching a movie. Maybe I shouldn't say that because you're supposed to be directed on your thing, right? But
oh, no, that's okay.
I don't know if there's anything really, really particular in terms of a movie. But I mean, you get to study art history, and so I look at a lot of paintings, and I look at that often. And
Mm,
so, I mean, right now, I'm basically I look at a lot of like early 20th century painters. I like that kind of work. Um, um, Nothing that really sings out at me. What I like is I like to look at how they're working with the space around the object that they're describing. So if it's
mm,
a portrait, it's like, well, what's going on behind the portrait? That's something that kind of interests me in painting.
mm.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great answer. I'm interested. I'll check out this Joe Roman book. Yeah, and it's interesting you started talking about the farm animals, and I'll just share with you, since you have some interest in that, like how this sort of started for me was, I was starting to hear more about climate change and like how our food system was affecting that. So I was sort of starting to inch towards vegetarianism. I met this woman at a bar who, long story short, just shared with me like, Jeremy, the animals you're eating there, they were in pain, they had fear, they were suffering, and then you're taking all that inside you. And I hadn't, while I don't necessarily believe that energy transfers in that kind of way, that was kind of the first time that I was really thinking, oh, the animals like are feeling things. Like I just was thinking them almost like they were automatons or something.
Yeah.
And she encouraged me to watch the film Earthlings, which is a documentary that shows animal agriculture and sort of all
Ooh.
the ways that we use animals. And so I went home, watched that film.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. You're braver
yeah.
than me. Yeah.
It's hard to
Yeah.
watch, but
Yeah.
for me, it was so necessary to see because while I could conceptualize that animals were being killed for food and that sort of thing, it
Right.
wasn't until I saw it that I really had this sort of intense like anger about it, where it was I am not going to support this. I am not going to give people money to do this. So anyway, that was sort of like how my journey started with veganism, and then very quickly became about animal rights and doing activism and stuff. And that's what sort of led me to doing this podcast, because I had done NPR in the past where I would do long form interviews. Like I
Yeah.
said, I started a channel with my buddy Wayne, who's this really prominent figure in the animal rights movement. And I thought, yeah, I'll give it a try myself. And so that's what led us to here. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was him who said at one point, kind of something similar to the stat that you cited. And he said something along the lines of, yeah, the average lived experience on this planet is a chicken in a cage, because
Yeah.
we, at least for, like flying animals, I guess, like, because the animals that we kill in the ocean are far dwarf the numbers. But in terms of like the animals we eat, chicken, I believe, especially in America, is like number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So many chickens in cages. And so yeah, anyway, and in terms of books and stuff, I read Animal Liberation after that. That was the Peter Singer novel. So yeah, a couple of books I could, recommend to you if you're interested in that sort of thing. But I'll check out Joe Roman.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're coming up on 2 hours, and I'm always worried, like I feel like people don't like, I don't know if people listen to long interviews and stuff anymore. By the way,
Yeah.
this will be an audio podcast. I should mention, I never mentioned that. If you go on Spotify, as you've mentioned a number of times, you can just search my name, Jeremy Loeb, and you can find the podcast. And a lot of people, I imagine, would probably rather listen to these in their car than like sitting in front of YouTube or something. So I'll mention that. But because we're coming up on so long an interview as
Yeah.
these tend to be, I don't want to go too much longer, but let me just ask you, is there anything you think that I didn't cover that you want to talk about or that we should talk about?
We've covered a long thing. I think I want to give you an anecdote that I think leave it on a kind of a funny thing. And this is
Okay.
recently. So you're studying Joe Roman, and you learn there's this event, right, that occurred, and this big asteroid comes down, and the dinosaurs are decimated, and there's this small percentage survive. And one of the survivors are the birds, right? The birds are sort of like our link to the dinosaurs in a way. So
Right.
when you
Right.
think about, for example, the crow, you think about, wow, what a brilliant animal, can use tools. They can figure out complex, things, move this rock, move this rock, move this rock. And there's the grain of food,
Mm,
and it knows that it puts rocks in the bottle. It can raise the level of the water so that it can drink some water. It's a very, very intelligent animal. It's very adaptive. They're very complex social organizations and familiar organizations. So I'm asking Gemini AI, right? So
mm,
I like to converse with AI Gemini. So I said
hmm
to AI Gemini, I said, all right, so if the crows are, if birds are like our link to dinosaurs, and the crow is one of these links as well, does that mean that there was high intelligence among dinosaurs? It's just like this idea occurred to me. What was the intelligence of dinosaurs like? And so Gemini gave this like very long answer. It was very interesting. But one of the things it said, I thought was very funny, and I'll leave it there. It said, well, we don't think that Tyrannosaurus Rex would roll over on its back so that you could pet its belly. Like, and I'm like, Gemini, man, you're like funnier than most people I know. It's like,
Well, an interesting side note about animals that it kind of reminded me that I might mention. By the way, with the film Earthlings and stuff, if you're interested,
yeah,
but you don't want to see like brutal footage and stuff, I will mention there's a couple of clips of brutal footage in the opening monologue, but there's like a nice 15-minute monologue that kind of makes all the points of the film
mhm,
encapsulated that you might be able to watch. But one of the beautiful points that I think that was made about animals was, that they are complete. They stand here complete, beautiful. And I think the quote was something like, blessed with the senses that we've lost or never attained.
oh, yeah,
So when we think about like, is an animal more intelligent
mhm,
in their way? And at that time, they're showing these butterflies flying, and that butterflies are sensing things beyond our capacity.
right,
And
right,
yeah, we have this such a human centric way of looking at animals. It's like,
yeah,
are they intelligent? If I can teach a dog a trick, right? But the
mhm,
dog has such different intelligence that they're
yes,
operating on this other level. But
yes.
anyway, I thought I'd add that on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just interject one thing. You were mentioning this earlier. From the Buddhist point of view, this idea of this awareness that I was talking about, that this sort of like surrounds our conceptual mind and our thinking and all of our emotional, our feeling. From the Buddhist point of view, that awareness is actually present also in animals.
Right.
So that, yeah, they also say that, it's somewhat easier for us to, you know to find the realization of that. It's difficult for animals. But they also talk about, like, there's Buddhas apparently that reincarnate, or reborn rather, as animals. So,
Mm.
that to help. And so, you got to be careful from their point of view. Is like, you got to be really careful, because you might be that cat over there could be a Buddha. But you see the whole idea, I mean, in another way, on a sort of like even more like simple kind of way, is what ideas like that do, is just teaches you how to be kind of, kind to the animals. Really,
Mhm.
this is just like being sensitive to your environment and to the other beings out there. So by
Right.
saying, well, the cat could be a Buddha, on one level it's just like, oh well, maybe I should be a little bit, I shouldn't be kind of my worst self around the cat, you know. So it
Right.
reminds me of the quote. What is the quote? It's like, "Be the person your dog thinks you are." You know,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like
yeah.
that one.
Yeah. I can't remember what film I watched, but I believe it was a Buddhist who was talking. It might have been Christspiracy, which, by the way, is another beautiful film that looks at religion and animals. And
Ah,
you can find that at christspiracy.com.
mhm.
And it looks at Christianity, Buddhism, all these different things. I believe it was a Buddhist I and I hope I'm getting this right because it might have been another film, but they had a cat in their lap and they were explaining, yeah, the cat is just driving a different machine than me. Essentially, like I was born into like a human machine. I'm driving a human machine. They were
Yeah,
born into a cat machine. They're driving a cat machine. It's a
yeah,
nice way of looking at it. And it goes to your point that, yeah, the cat could be the Buddha because, it's just some consciousness was born in a different body,
right.
and I love that about Buddhism. It does seem to encourage and teach people about compassion and kindness to others, which
Yeah,
is why, as not someone who's not religious and doesn't find and doesn't follow any kind of religion, if I were to choose one, it
yeah,
probably would be something like Buddhism or Taoism or something along those lines. Because I just like kind of the conclusions that are drawn by taking them to their logical ending. Essentially,
right.
it's treating others with kindness and compassion.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So, and just sort of bring it full circle back to your music. Again, I'll make that point that I feel that in your music, that it kind of opens me to like a sort of a sensitivity, like a kindness, and I think that's why I am drawn back to your music. Um, that it's interesting. It takes me on this kind of metaphysical journey in a way. Like I said, I feel it kind of is like eating mushrooms, like opens my brain up to another thing that I didn't realize. Uh, but it also just I feel like it changes who I am while I'm listening to the music. It changes me into a kind of a different human being in a
Oh,
way.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
That's very, very meaningful to me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, one last question because I didn't ask this. And it's not the best ending, but I'm just curious, like, what is sort of the feedback that you get from people? Like you've heard from me, I've emailed you, like you said, you emailed some people. Like, I'm wondering if you get that kind of feedback very often, and what sort of
I don't
stuff do
get
you get?
feedback like that often. I get
Hmm.
feedback from that, periodically, and it's usually I usually hear from people that like it, so I
Right.
don't hear from people that don't like it. So I don't get, I mean, I'm sure that there's plenty of people that, don't like it because they're interested in a particular kind of music,
Hmm.
um, you know, I, I mean, if you're really interested in, oh, I don't know, like death metal or something like that, it's like maybe my music wouldn't be the music that was exclusively you were listening to, and all of a sudden you're presented with this, might not like it. So you wouldn't even bother to tell me, but to somebody, yeah, I mean, it's similar. I mean, I mean, I think you've been the best fan, so I really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks.
My
Best
my
fan.
my I have it's basically my circle of friends and my family that give me
Mm.
feedback, and um, the other musicians that I'm connected with. And there's actually a connection of musicians on Facebook. So there's actually a large collection of indie musicians that kind of meet in secret rooms and stuff on
Oh,
Facebook.
wow.
We exchange stuff, and I have, like friend in Belgium, friends in Italy, friends in Sweden that we talk about some of this stuff with,
Oh,
share
wow. That's
music.
very
Yeah,
interesting. The
yeah, it's rare.
secret. I haven't. I was never invited, but that's because I wasn't composing music.
Yeah, it's
I didn't get
mostly
invited.
composers only,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and they're sharing their track and getting feedback, and people
yeah.
are putting it on their playlists and things like that.
Uh,
There is that mechanism is going on. Yeah.
that's wonderful. Well, how can people find your music? How can they follow you? Is it just they search your name, or what is
Yeah,
it?
I think
Yeah.
you go on the search on Spotify, and if you wanted to listen on Spotify, I mean, there's Spotify, there's Amazon, there's Apple Music. Those are probably the three big ones, I think, and certainly there are others, but you can do a search on my name, and it's going to pop up. If you Jim Sande music, you're going to definitely find stuff on Google. A lot of stuff.
Yeah. And are you? I know from following you on Facebook. I don't think you're a huge social media person, but do you want people following you on social media? Are there places that you'd send people?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I have a blog.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. jcsandy.blogspot.com. I
Okay.
actually have had that for a long time. So jcsandy.blogspot.com.
Okay.
And I post some of my work and just things that I find interesting. And
Mm,
I've no politics at all. That's my rule. I'm just not going there anymore with
gotcha.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't stomach it right now. I mean, I need a little reprieve while I
We
figure it
all
out.
do.
I think we all need it
We,
in a way, yeah.
yeah.
So, and then on Facebook, there is a Jim Sande music and art page, and I'm on Instagram too, but I don't have I don't have a lot of people. I don't really push it a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll link to all these sources so that people can find you. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, and thank you again for
Yeah.
the years of music and the correspondences that you've provided. Is it means a lot to me. And
Okay.
and the music is just outstanding. And I hope that at least a few people listening to this, because my channel is not very big, I hope at least a few people will discover your music and find as much meaning that I do with it. So.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you so
Jim,
much. Yeah.
such a pleasure to meet you, yeah, and you're always welcome to come back if you're ever wanting to promote some music or anything, or you want a part two of the conversation,
Sure.
or
Okay.
anything. You can invite yourself on, and I'll always invite you back.
Okay. Well, similarly, and then, I'd be happy to do it too. So, I'm kind of more passive about that stuff. I don't like to push myself too much.
Yeah, I know, I know.
I don't push
You're a very humble guy. I could tell. Like when I reached out to Jim, he was like, "Well," he's like, "Well, I guess, but I don't." He's like, I'm not really like I don't really know what I'd talk about." You're yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a really nice humble response that I got from you, and I thought, "Oh yeah, this will still be interesting." So
myself.
yeah, I appreciate it.
All right.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much,
All
Jim,
right.
and everybody go check out Jim Sande's stuff, and we'll talk to you soon.